Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Thriving Adoptees podcast. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Lisa Ann. Looking forward to our conversation, Lisa. Yeah,
Well, thank you. I'm glad to be back here with you again, Simon, and looking forward to this conversation as well.
yeah. So, Lisa Ann's been on before. I've been on her podcast, which is the Wandering Tree podcast. Links in the show notes, as always, listeners. And from the first time I spoke to Lisa Ann, I could feel that we were kindred spirits in our philosophies are fairly well aligned, I think, which makes for a really deep dive because we don't have to. Yeah, we're just going deeper on the same stuff, and we're going. There's no kind of need to talk about different stuff. We can just really go to the heart of the matter.
Yeah, we can cut to the chase. I think
We
that's
can
what we're
cut to the
getting
chase.
to.
And you summed
Absolutely.
that up. You summed that far better than me. I was waffling around there, Lisa. So that's cool. So
Well,
today we're
that's
talking.
us.
That's us. So today we're talking healing, and we're always talking healing on the Thriving Adoptees podcast. For the foreseeable future, we will be talking healing, and that's on the back of a thing, something that I noticed last year, which was we're all great at describing trauma, but we're not as great as describing healing. And I include myself in that, clearly, right? And so, how many episodes have you done now?
Oh
Like,
gosh, I lose track. Nothing near to yours, but our trajectories are different and our plans are
yeah,
different too. But I would say I resonate with a couple of the statements that you just made, which is uh, categorizing the adoptee experience and the journey. I would agree there is a theme of being able to discuss the trauma very well and the impacts of that. And I do see a shift, and I would attribute a good portion of that to your show as it relates to how can we heal or how can we now move our conversation to the other side of the spectrum that says what are the tools that we can do that. So episode wise, I don't know. I think I really lost track, but we are launching our fourth season. It dropped today, episode one of season four, with one of your former guests, Julie Ryan McGee,
yeah,
as you know, just is launching out a new book, and it's a fantastic episode. So thank you for letting me plug that for 2 seconds. It also wraps around healing, and it's key.
yeah. So uh, Lisa Ann said that we're on different trajectories. Lisa Ann has a day job, right? That's why, like I am so prolific because this is my day job. And yeah, that's where it. But yeah, Julie's a a great guest and a massive heart. And if you listener are an author or wannabe author, look at what Julie does, because the way she gets her word out about her book through podcasts, through appearing on reading groups, and through basically putting her whole heart and soul into not only writing the books but getting the word out of the books is great. So look, she's great on that. Look at that, and she's obviously a great guest too. And like, there's no need to apologize for plugging here, right? We're here to help everybody along, right? So I've just been on a relatively new podcast called uh, Roots Reimagined for adoptees.
Oh,
And they're a young team. I think they've got maybe 10 in the can. So I'm trying to do that, trying to help others. And yesterday I interviewed a guest. Oh no, I didn't interview a guest. I had a pre-interview chat with uh, an upcoming author, and I've introduced her to some other people today, other podcasters, because we have to support one another. And, you know, like together we get the message out and together we heal.
Yeah, I like that approach. It also tags in very nicely with the healing theme. There is so much room in the community for all variations of the conversation. And we are only going to heal together by lifting each other up. I know you are this way too. This is why we have such a great relationship. I have no boundaries of who I'm willing to talk to or who I'm willing to have on the show and say, you're here, I'm here. Let's talk about what matters and get it out because there are, you know, a category of humans in the world that the numbers are greater than one that are, you know, living a journey that we have different relatable pieces to, and we can learn from one another and grow and heal.
Yeah. So what does healing mean to you, Lisa Ann?
Well, I'm going to give a little context, and there was a period more recently where I was not very healthy, mindset healthy. I reference it as an abyss. And so, what does healing mean for me? Healing means for me that I am able to move forward in life and not sit in an abyss. And it has a lot of different characteristics to that. For myself, and you know, on my journey, even as a podcaster, as an adoptee, and as an advocate, I am amazed at how impactful a ceremony or an event can be to who we are when it happens, no matter our level of preparation, if that makes sense to you. And I know we have talked in past conversation about the impact of reunion. We've talked about secondary rejection, but I don't know if we've ever really dug into how it affects how we see ourselves and then how do we come from that and heal. So what does healing mean? I want to be a productive human. That's what healing means by my definition of healing. I want to have joy. I don't want to sit in an abyss. And I want to see the world in more of a positive light, not just in the trauma light.
Yeah. So, you know, you've talked about not sitting in the abyss, and you talked about moving forward. So this is about motion, right? For you, this is about moving on, moving forward. You also in the introduction you talked about uh, furthering the conversation, and what comes to mind is a quote from a mentor of mine's really who was really important back in the day when I was first looking at this stuff, so 17 years ago. He said the past is a place of reference, not a place of residence.
Ooh, I love that.
And
I
and
love
that's
that.
what I was thinking, because you're talking about, so he wasn't talking about moving forward, he was talking about not staying stuck in the past. And you know, when you think of being adopted, I was adopted coming up 57 years ago, right? So we're recording this on Thursday, 11th of January. I think my adoption date, that when my mum and dad collected me from the adoption agency in Liverpool, I think it was like the 2nd of February. But you know, I'd been born in or the second, 9th of February, something like that. But I'd been born on the 4th of January 1967. And you've got a birthday. Your birthday's next month, right? You've got
It is. Great
February.
memory.
So,
Yeah.
so you talked about ceremonies. So, are you alluding to? Are you including kind of birthday parties in here, or what did you mean by ceremonies?
Yeah, that's a great question. For I mean all of it. I really do mean all of it. I mean the ceremony of my birth. I do mean the ceremony of the official adoption day. I also include every birthday. I include every holiday, every major life event. And as it directly relates to adoption, I am more centered around the search and reunion and post reunion mentality of that conversation or that portion. I don't think I could segregate them into independent events because it is the sum of the whole that uh, creates the who I am. Where sometimes for me, speaking only in my own experience, it has had more impact than I might have recognized was the search, reunion, post reunion continuum. I'll use that word for, right, a time period, and how I may have taken residency, utilizing your quote, in a space around the activities that were going on during that time period. I'm still in post reunion, but it looks different in 2024 than it looked in 2023, 2022, 2021, and 2020. It looks very different now.
Yeah.
I don't know if you had this experience. I think that we talked about this a little bit one other time, but I lost my self-worth in that span of 3-ish years, almost 4 years. And I don't wish that on anybody. I do not wish that on any human or any adoptee, but I did. I lost the grounding that I was on about who I was and how valuable I was to the world. That's crushing. I don't know about how you feel about that, but that's crushing.
Yeah, the not good enough theme is is huge. And as someone who's done a lot of healing and a lot of looking and a lot of exploring, and I'm talking about 17 years worth, 14 of those years were outside the community. And one of the big things, sorry, I had to mute myself because I was coughing. And one of the big things that really hit me in deep conversations with other people over those periods is that non-adoptees, none of them think that they're good enough either. And
I agree.
we don't have the monopoly on it. And there's, for me, there's a so what in that, right? So what? So what? Well, so what it occurs to me is that we can learn from non-adoptees. I'm very keen to make this separation between the trauma that we feel and the essence of who we are. So how I feel isn't who I am. If we say, traumas in, that in intense, toxic cocktail of shame that you're alluding to, not feeling we're enough, shame, fear, or terror, of rejection or of secondary rejection, probably in this sense. So shame, fear, or terror, or anger. So for me, anger, she didn't love me enough to effing keep me. She gave me the effing teddy bear as an effing consolation prize, right? So trauma is I see it as a toxic cocktail, of strong emotions. But we're the cocktail glass. We're not the contents of it, right? So that identity, I think we're great at describing, as we said, we're great at describing trauma. We're great at describing our confusion about our identity, and we're less good at describing what identity means. And if we don't understand, if we haven't got a lived understanding and experience, an internal experience of who we are, then how are we going to separate the trauma that we feel from the essence of who we are? And again, I don't know if I'm making any sense here at all. If this is a human thing, then there are some superb authors and speakers and guides and coaches that have really explained identity with far more clarity than we see than I, in my opinion, that we see in the adoption space. We talk about confusion about identity, but we don't talk about identity.
Well, let's dive in there a little bit. And the reason I'm going to ask us to do that is I 100% agree with you. And I'm going to share a little bit about my lived experience for context. Prior to search, reunion, and post reunion, I'll tell you about me. I call it at the top of the mountain. I loved my life, Simon. I lived well. I experienced life. I traveled. I did cool things. I mean, I could list them. And when I look in reflection to who I was, how I approached my life, the things I did, how I succeeded, where I was climbing a corporate ladder, where I was climbing the life, milestone ladders. I was unstoppable. I have resonated with high intellect and, just constantly giving in the community, embracing life, just, all in. Does not mean that during that time period, pre-search reunion and post-reunion, those three items, that I didn't have struggles. That doesn't mean that. Just means my value and my self-worth at the top of the triangle was pretty solid. I still really liked me. I loved me. I was funny. I was maybe charismatic to an extent. I can be kind of sarcastic too, but the me was a little more solid. Then I learned my beginnings truth. And what I learned did not match that identity at all. And it brought in a self-doubt about who I was. And so when we are talking about our identity in this context, I do align with your thought process around we probably do struggle with the component of talking about what makes us us. And I've spent a year, an entire calendar year, studying the concepts of behavior and personality and intelligence and intellect and all of that, what it means to be who you are. And I would advocate the biggest piece of healing is somehow reconciling, and each of us is going to be different, that just because we learned something about how we got here today on this earth is counter to how we viewed ourselves, in your case 57 years, in my case almost 52 years. It doesn't have to be the earth-shattering item that it could be. And if we, through our conversation, can help others get to that spot that says, I wish I had had a conversation with someone who said, Lisa, you might learn something about yourself that you could have never imagined. Don't let it destroy you, right? Don't let the realization that you, wow, okay, I didn't think that was going to happen, destroy how you feel about yourself. Simon, don't let the teddy bears and all that stuff boil the anger so that you can't move forward, right? If there had just been one conversation with someone, I don't even know who, maybe two, I might be stubborn, maybe three, that just said, don't let it destroy you. Just don't let it destroy you. I might have been better off.
Yeah.
Shoulda, woulda, coulda, right?
Yeah. So what healing moments come to mind in terms of the most profound stuff for you?
It was, I had I don't know, a flash moment, a tipping point. I don't know how I want to characterize this particular event. I had an event. I had a health event. I had a health scare. I I was on a vacation. I collapsed. I spent I spent 6+ hours in a cruise ship's emergency room, if that will give you any kind of
Yeah.
context. And so I had a lot of time to think about life and what was going on, while every 2 hours they were drawing my blood and running tests and trying to figure out if I was going to, have a neurological or a cardiac event. Uh, it wasn't a drunken episode. So let me just put everybody to rest on that. It wasn't that type of a thing at all. In fact, it was far from it. But in those 6 hours and walking out of and off the ship the next morning, I realized something's got to give. This can't go on. So my healing moment was first the realization I don't ever want to do that again. And whatever's going on in my brain associated with how I feel about myself is obviously impacting my health. Because prior to that, I've been a fairly healthy human, in the context of life health events. That was my grounding moment. And then from there, I started searching for, what do I need to get back to me? Well, first of all, I need to figure out what does me look like? So I started reading. I started connecting with other adoptees as well that are healing. I believe you've had Danielle Gaudette on your podcast as well. Love her, love her. I've had Michelle Madrid as a guest. I think you have as well. Love
Yeah.
her, love her. Uh, uh, I hate when I use the stutter words. Emma Stevens, aka Linda Pivac, who's come into, talking about that. Some very strong some very strong advocates in our space that have helped me get to a better place and for me to want to pay it forward.
Yeah. So you've mentioned three of my favorite people there, and all of their books. Well, Emma's book isn't quite as clearly educational, shall we say. Danielle's book and Michelle's book especially are very, you talked about being healing as being mindset healthy. Those three books are must reads if you want adoptee specific books. Definitely, but for sure, those three really know they really know their onions. Definitely.
Yeah, onions, I love that. You know what I would say too about Emma Linda's book? The first one, which is the gathering, it's gathering
Tree.
place, right? It's just
Gathering
the
place, yeah.
yeah, the gathering place. I'm so sorry, Emma, Linda, I'm so sorry. But that is a fantastic first book to read, and I did find that one to be very healing as well.
She talked when I interviewed her for the first time. She talked about the magic of healing, and that is really struck me because I think it is about magic and mystery, not about psychology. It's about fundamental shifts in perspective. It's not looking at it's not, yeah, it's spirit. I believe it's spiritual rather than psychological. And she also talks in that book about being addicted to thought, which I thought was genius, because the addiction that we have to the thought to which we are addicted as adoptees, and I would say also for the rest of the human race too, is the thought that we're not good enough. And it's not a thought really. It's bigger than that. It's a lot of thoughts coming together to create a mind that is set. It is a belief. We hear so much about trauma in the adoption world. We hear very little about beliefs, and I think that the fundamental belief that we have as adoptees that we're not good enough is a defining thing, and it's a belief to be busted, right? So yeah, and Emma Linda was also, she talks about addiction to thought, but she also talks about addiction to alcohol, and the shifts around that, the spiritual stuff around that. And whenever I get near this addiction stuff, I think of a book by a guy called Ben Timberlake. He's not an adoptee. He was an adrenaline junkie who took heroin for 2 weeks to see what it would be like to come off it. 5 years later, he came off it, and he came off it on the back of one spiritual insight. And the book's like 8 hours long, and the insight was, I realized that I was bigger than my addiction. And that's it. That's he doesn't describe it in any more detail than that. But those sorts of jaw-dropping insight moments are what insights are the oil that heal us. I think the oil of the healing machine. So you had this insight on the back of this medical emergency on the cruise ship. Oh, I had to ask you just to lighten it up a minute. George Clooney wasn't in that ER, was he?
He was not in that ER.
Okay, so we're on series 10 of ER, my wife, and George Clooney, his first break was in the ER. It was in the ER for the first 4 seasons, I think, something like that. So I just wondered whether he'd gone from the from County General in downtown Chicago to a cruise ship ER, but he hasn't. He's actually on Lake Garda, isn't he? Spending a lot of time with his new wife on Lake Garda. Anyway, just lightening it up a bit.
Yeah,
But yeah,
yeah.
so
Well, he wasn't on the love ship either then, or
wasn't
the
on the
love
love
boat,
ship.
remember it? From the 80s, the TV show The Love Boat. He was
No,
not, he did not transition.
he
So
didn't,
yeah, I love
self
that.
or the self love for adoptees boat, right?
Yeah.
So
You know, one of the items, Simon, just to kind of tap in a little bit with you, that I think is true and valuable was your connection and inclination of a little bit of spirituality versus just 100% psychological. I believe that's a really good place to bring people to in terms of how they can self-assess as well their worth. And one of the items during that time period that I used, which I found really valuable, was to ask myself, the thought that I'm having right this minute, is it true? Is it true? And if it is not true, what do I need to do to get back on solid ground and put it away, put it
yeah,
to bed? And I think that is the kind of the more spiritual moment of connecting your mind and your body together so that you can, have these joyous moments and we can have a fantastic conversation and joke around about George Clooney because the adverse of that is, or the converse of that is, we sit in just the heaviness of every adoptee topic, right?
yeah. And if you're interested in that sort of thought challenging stuff, I'd recommend people take a look at. I mean, did you get this from Byron Katie? Did you come across? Have you come across it? So yeah, Byron Katie, she's got a 4-step process that looks at challenging thoughts, and it's a what's the word? Surprisingly, it sounds pretty shallow, but it's as deep as you want it to go. And I was thinking about the mind, body, spirit connection that you mentioned there when you were describing what happened, the realization that you had after the 6 hours in the ER, not with George Clooney. So yeah, it is. And if I realized that my identity stuff a little bit earlier might have been unclear. So by identity, I mean us as spirit. And if that freaks you out, listener, I mean us as awareness. And if that doesn't mean anything either, I'll try a third word, which is consciousness. Us as consciousness. So, and what's that got to do with thoughts? So we're talking about us as the space in which the thoughts and feelings and trauma appears. We're separating who we are. Yeah, we're separating who we are from the trauma we are aware of, right? So it's the consciousness, not the trauma we are conscious of. Identity as consciousness, the space in which our mind and our mindset and our thoughts and our feelings and our trauma.
Yeah, I translate that into leveling up our self-awareness beyond that trauma.
Yes.
I like that.
So many people will talk about self-awareness, and what they're talking about really is becoming aware of their behavior. Self-awareness,
Okay.
how self-aware are you? It means, do you catch? So when I started looking at that, when I first heard self-awareness, probably 20 years ago in business, it was when I was running a small business, like 5 of us or something, It was me becoming aware of when I was in a bad mood, and that that came out in my conversations with my my team, right, with my employees. So self-awareness, we're talking about self as in consciousness, self as in awareness, and in internal family systems, which I know a lot of people into because it's a great basis for therapy. We're talking about uppercase S, self. We're not talking about behavior. We're not talking about what we do. We're not talking about what we do, what we think, or what we feel. We're talking about who we are.
Well, that's an interesting distinction, and I like I like how you kind of mapped it back to the professional world a little bit, because that is a buzzword in the professional world. What I also take in that is how you show up for yourself and for others, and then mapping that back to what you're indicating through our conversation here, the connection to who I am and the identity component of that. And the distinction, kind of what I'm taking and learning, which is why I love these conversations, is not just how I show up in the moment and I'm aware of how I'm showing up, but just the core of who I am.
Yeah, and it's self-knowledge,
Mm-hmm.
self-knowledge as and that's why I think that people like Don Miguel Ruiz, people like Eckhart Tolle, people like the Dalai Lama, people like my favorite Rupert Spira, they're great at describing identity in this this space.
Mm-hmm.
And I was thinking, as you were talking about the professional stuff, I was thinking about something I heard years ago from a guy called Zig Ziglar, which is about your attitude determines your altitude. So we're looking within, so that we're getting on more in life without. And you talked to be about being a productive human being. So we're looking at the how the inside determines the outside.
The outside.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
take us back to the insights off the back of this 6 hours in this health event.
Coming out on the other side, I realized for myself I needed to do a reframing and I needed to stop digging a hole and start building a ladder and be comfortable with all the things I learned and to not sit in them indefinitely. And that came through a lot of reading, a lot of self-reflection, the self-assessment of if is it really true? And then just how I'm going to show up for myself. I'm less worried about how I'm showing up for everybody else, but how am I going to show up for myself? And being comfortable again with who I am. I don't want to be thinking that I'm less than because I'm not. And the reality is, if I look at the sum of the total of the most of the adoptees that I talk to, we are nowhere near deprecating humans. We are actually amazing, amazing humans in spite of the adversity. We are champions, and there are other champions and other communities that have some adjacent characteristics to adoptees as well. So it's not, we don't corner the market if that's, I don't want to say that, but I'm not going out I'm certainly I'm not breaking laws. I'm not breaking any major social norms. I'm not horrid. I'm human. And just putting me in that context of, if this is the worst thing about me, if, for example, if the worst thing about me is you don't like the tone of my voice, if that's the worst thing about me, man, I can live with that. And so I do have a favorite quote. It's the Oscar Wilde quote, which is, "Be yourself, everyone else is taken." And I can map that back to all of the mirroring, trying to fit in, the people pleasing. We could spend hours, I know you and I could spend hours talking about that. But that's the backside. I'm 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 happy again with who I am. Am I 100% healed? Well, first of all, no human's ever going to be 100% healed. In the context of what we're going to face as life, there are going to be ups and downs, but man, I am better than I was obviously a year ago, a year and a half ago. And I think you're a fantastic human. I met many, many fantastic humans, and I think I'm a fantastic human. And I want to sit in that space. I want to be in that description of healthy.
Yeah. I think you're a fantastic human too.
But thank you.
Well, there's a reason that the Thriving Adoptees logo is a diamond, right?
Diamonds in the rough.
So you basically, to me, sounds like you're describing, you use the word ladder, you've used the word the abyss, you've used the word self-reflection, and you've used the kind of tactic or strategy of reading. So basically, you have self-reflected, and that has been, your self-reflection has been your ladder out of an abyss.
Yeah, it really was. It was just the acknowledgement of just really the acknowledgement of not really internalizing that just because I learned something about how I arrived on the earth or some of my genetic dispositions has changed who I am. And I do speak openly. There is a thread of my story that is around the memories from other humans, other people in my story, that I am a product of sexual assault. That's hard to grapple with. And then I also am a product of a biological mother that had a different learning trajectory than I did, and that's hard to grapple with. So, but those things, they didn't define who I was before I knew them. They don't have to define how I feel about myself or how healthy I am or what joy I have in life just because I know them now. So yeah, very tactical, very self-assessment oriented, very much aligned with try not to overthink this thing too, and don't let it destroy you. And find the ladder, whatever that is. If the first rung on the ladder for myself is self-assessment, that's the first rung.
Yeah. So the rough was obscuring the diamond.
I would say it was. Absolutely. Hmm.
I saw.
Very astute observation.
I heard. Thank you. I just want to. I just want to have put a bit of lightness in about compliments there. So when Lisa Ann's wearing a purple top, and I love purple, and it's one of my favorite colors. Purple and orange are my favorite colors. And this was about 15 years ago. We're on holiday, and I complimented somebody. I complimented somebody on their top on holiday, and we'd been speaking a group of us have been speaking together at lunchtime, and it's by a beach bar, so everybody's just in sneakers, sneakers, trainers, we call them trainers, and shorts and swim gear, and but we saw this. We met together at the same bar that night, and I complimented this woman on the color of her top, right? And she looked at me like I was absolutely nuts. And I said, great color top. I love that color. And she looked at me like, you're nuts, Simon. So I said, well, I had a top bit similar color to that a few years ago. I loved it. I don't know where it's gone. I'm going to have to find it. She still looked like I'm not. And she was just unable to take the compliment. Like, we're not great. This wasn't an adoptee, by the way, right? This, not to my knowledge. But we're not great. We're not great at accepting compliments. And wouldn't it be better if we could accept them a little bit more? Yeah.
Yeah, it would be nice. All right, I have a joke for you.
Cool.
So I've implemented in one of my teams, because life does get heavy. This is where puns come in handy, right? Life gets heavy, and this is just one of the ways we as humans try to lighten up the world. So why are pirates called pirates?
I don't know. Why are pirates called pirates?
They just are.
Oh, it's terrible.
Oh, it's fantastic because it's so terrible that it's fantastic.
Yeah. I heard I heard one today, which is I just thought it was a nice juxtaposition. Yeah, to say I am an overthinker is an understatement.
Ooh. I would adopt that one.
Yeah.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, that's fantastic. I love when we can laugh because it shows our health shining through.
It does. Did you see the thing that I came? It hasn't become a thing, but I love it. So, something I came up with last year. Some fellow adoptee was talking about the body keeps the score. This is all doom and gloom, right? And I was thinking about soccer, right? And I thought, yeah, the body keeps the score. And I think about football scores, soccer scores, right? And I was thinking about this while I was swimming, and I came up with trauma one, right? Because trauma scores first, right? Trauma scores early in the game, early in our lives.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. Adoptees United, 10. Trauma 1, Adoptees United, 10. Because it's Adoptees United, right? It's not just one, it's us coming together. And more important than the name is the score. We thrashed them.
Yeah, I like that.
We thrashed them. Yeah.
I like that. Yeah, you got to keep pushing that forward so that as we have these conversations, and each time someone hears you say that, they're going to be like, yeah, we're powerful, we're strong, we're slaying this dragon.
Yeah.
We're coming out on the other side of whatever the score is.
Yeah. And the thing about a diamond is it's the toughest substance on earth, right? Yeah. It can't be scratched, right? If it can't be scratched, it can't be cut. If it can't be cut, it can't be wounded. That was my big one. The fact that our essence is fundamentally unwoundable.
Yeah, that's very powerful as well. Yeah, absolutely.
So, what do you think gets in our way of that? You talked about moving forward. You're talking about continuing the conversation. I put those together and called it motion. And then we talked about kind of forward thinking, past as a place of reference, not a place of residence. And you mentioned being, not sitting in the abyss, not getting stuck, building a ladder, building our own ladder. You built your own ladder out of the abyss, and you continue to build the ladder. What keeps us stuck?
I can only speak for myself. I know
What
we were
keeps you
joking a little
stuck?
bit.
What keeps you
What
stuck?
keeps me
Sorry.
stuck or what pulls me back and then I get stuck. It is my own internal thought process for them, really, in all fairness to anyone listening. I am what keeps me stuck. And so I do know
Hold on a
that
minute.
about myself.
Hold on a minute. Right. Sorry. We are not our thoughts. Right? So
Yes, I know we can say that.
it's not your thought process. I'm with you. I'm with you. So the one I me too. Yeah, but not because it isn't me. Like we've got this, we use this phrase, right? Everybody uses this phrase, getting in our own way. Oh, we're getting in our own way. No, we're not getting in our own way. Some crap that we've believed is getting in our own way. A thought is getting in our own way. And our thought isn't us. We're so, like, me too. I spend like 2 hours a day and like trying to get this stuff deeper. But we're not our thoughts. We're not getting in our own way. Like we use this word mindset. Well, what about mind fluid? Mindset's like concrete, going nowhere. What about mind fluid, mind open?
Yeah, let me take a couple steps back into your challenging, and I love the challenge. The first
Oh, I'm
is
relieved about that because I thought I'd totally shut you down.
no, not at all. Not at all. I do like the challenge of the thought process. I'm not aligned maybe 100% with getting in your own way because that's a whole different topic in my mind and in context. Because you don't have to be an adoptee to do stupid stuff to get in the way, right? And so that for me, only for me, I don't ever think about this as I'm getting in my own way. Now, mindset versus mind fluid, I'd have to think about that a little bit more. I do I do resonate though with a little bit of if I'm constantly churning and I'm in a dark cycle of internal dialogue, I'm going to maybe move forward slower. My motion will be different. My outlook and attitude will be different. So I know that of myself. I can only speak for me. I do know that. I can see it. I can see it in me. But that doesn't define who I am. That's not what I'm saying. I do know that if I spend too much time up here in the cranial spot, going back and forth in that gray matter, I'm I'm gonna spin. It's a reality. That's a reality for myself. And maybe that's not for everybody, but yeah. So it's not, I don't think it's set. I think it can be a fluid process as you have described it. But be but being in that space, I guess, or in myself might be a good way to describe that as well. I think that that's important to acknowledge. So when you when you made the joke about overthinking is what an understatement. Yeah, there's something to be said for that behavior. It could be a behavior. If we could categorize it as a behavior, there's something to be said for that. There's enough around why you do that. And I don't want to take that out of context. I don't want to underpin that just because I think about things at a level that some people could never understand. I don't see it as necessarily defining me, but I do see it as some of how I present me. If did that make sense?
I think so. When I'm overthinking, it isn't good thinking. Do you know what
Usually
I
it's not.
mean? It's usually
Hmm.
it's not. I guess it's the difference between yeah. Actually, I I still do it, but a little bit less. But I'm less bothered about the fact that I do it. It's the resistance thing. That's the one
Hmm.
that gets me.
You mean the resistance to overthinking?
Yeah.
Mm,
So I, I used to I used to do this a lot. I used to worry about worrying a lot more than I do now.
I see.
And I remember being called out on that by
Hmm.
by a coach. Oh, what, you worried about worrying, Simon? And I went, yeah. And then the penny dropped that that like it's like self anxiety shaming, isn't it? I mean, it's a bit nuts.
Yeah, I mean it has the potential based off of where you and I have been to create some undue anxiety. Absolutely. Um, I mean, it could definitely do overthinking has that very strong potential. I think
And
for myself, I just want to be me, be me and be
because
comfortable
everyone else is taken, as you said, right?
because everyone else is taken. I just want to be me and like me. I want to like me. And I like me again. That's really important for how I feel about who I am and kind of my identity where we've kind of been going back and forth on in this conversation. I really want to like me and I like me.
Yeah. And I like you too. And I think to pull it together, what I wasn't liking myself because I was overthinking.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So self, yeah, well, yeah, behavior,
Yeah,
self,
self-deprecating and
self-deprecation.
I think a lot of people can resonate with that listen to, will listen to this conversation. Self-deprecation is really quite an animal. But if I now transition us a little bit so that it's lightens it up, I'll take your cue, lighten it up a little bit. We have touched on, gosh, a boatload of great tools out there and approaches. I hope someone leaves listening to this conversation going, I could go read Danielle's book or Michelle's book or one of Emma's books. I could do a self-assessment. I could use some of the wording that Simon laid down, mind fluid, as an example. I think I'm going to sit on that a little bit, and I don't know. I think I'd be satisfied with the episode. I'd
Yeah,
be satisfied that if just one person again left listening to this conversation between you and I, they went, I like me. I
yeah,
don't need to know that that's what's happened, but it would be a win.
certainly would. Thank you, Lisa Ann, and thank you, listeners. We will
Yeah,
speak
absolutely.
very soon. Take care. Bye bye.